Okay, I think we are pretty... Oh, it's 12:20. Okay, without further ado, let's get going. Welcome everybody to today's clinic. I have a little bit of material prepared, but of course this clinic is about your questions, your issues, your concerns. And before I go any further, are there any questions right now about anything HDF related that anyone would like to ask? I mean, HDF related to your application, how you use it, or how you think you might be using it, or anybody? No? Okay, then, but at any time, feel free to raise your hand, interrupt me. Lori, or some of you will pay attention if there's a hand raised, because I have only a single screen here, and I'm gonna bring this browser here to the front, and then I cannot see anymore what's going on in Zoom. Okay, so today's topic is, I want to tell you something a little bit, a project that we just started about under a program by the National Science Foundation called Safe OSE, Safe Open Source Ecosystems, and we received an award, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And I will stay mostly focused on the mind map, but all the references that I will make today to the survey, most importantly, and I hope I mention multiple times today, please go there and take the survey that will ask you questions about your safety, security, and privacy concerns around HDF5, and whether you would be interested in joining a special interest group and so forth. But then there are also references to papers, the award itself, HDF5 related CVE records, an interesting, that's I believe the most recent one, and interesting in many different regards. And then we also have a separate category on the forum dedicated to safety, security, and privacy, or SSP, as I will refer to them, where we will discuss issues like that. And then there is a copy here of the mind map. Feel free to use it and spread the word. And of course, in all materials, we will include this disclaimer. That's part of the deal. And of course, we are happy to acknowledge the support by the National Science Foundation. And okay, there's a lot to talk about, and I can talk for hours about this, but I will try to quickly take us around this mind map and highlight a few issues along the lines of background. Number two, what I would call the SSP trillium. There is a little bit of confusion. Some people think safety, security, privacy, isn't that all the same thing? And some people talk always about security, but maybe mean safety sometimes they mean privacy. So I'll explain in the context of HDF5 a little bit how we talk about it in this project. Then the approach that we take in this project, and what the outcomes of this project will be, and what we promised the National Science Foundation to deliver, and what their expectations are. And there will be innovations in various areas. And then most importantly, if you are interested, how you can get involved immediately. And so that's one quick turn around this mind map. And now I'll go a little bit into detail here. Number one, background. Okay, if you go to the MITRE, I believe, or the organization that runs the Common Vulnerabilities and Exploits website, you will find since 2016 there have been around 135 maybe CVE records. Not all of them exactly related to the HDF5 library in file format, some of them in the surrounding ecosystem, and we'll see an example in a moment, then of course this triggered our interest in when NSF announced Safe OSE. We wanted to write a proposal, and in the proposal preparation, we had collaborators, and whom I thank very much for supporting us. Since I'd be happy to name them, however, I have not asked them for their permission to name them. So for now, I will not name them, but I'd be happy to do that in the future if I have permission from them. Now, there is, you might have said, well, the other day I read about there is this secure self-describing data project. What has that to do with that? And isn't the HDF group also part of that? And the answer to both questions is yes. So number one, there is an NSF project, secure self-describing data, by a different NSF program, and it's definitely a research project. It's the PI on this project is our good friend and colleague Suren Bainer at Ohio State University, and Scott Breitenfeld here at the HDF group is a co-PI on this project. And this project investigates, broadly speaking, for secure self-describing data, of which HDF5 is an example, but not the only example. There are other important examples such as ADIOS, ZAR, and many others. And so they are looking into researching questions about how do you how can you define a threat model? What kind of threats exist against such secure self-describing formats? What kind of tools do you need to assess the vulnerabilities of formats like this? And they've done quite a bit of research, and one of the research outputs, actually, we are using directly with some extensions in the Safe OSE project. So a convenient way and short way to think about the relationship between Safe OSE and S2D2 is S2D2 does a lot of research work as much as possible within the given period of performance, which is 2 years for Safe OSE. We will absorb, if it suits the goals of Safe OSE, which is, yes, at its heart focused on the HDF5 library and file format and the surrounding ecosystem. So we will be talking about H5Py, your applications, practices in the adjacent ecosystems, the software supply chain to third parties, their security practices, and so forth. So Safe OSE is about practicing safety, security, and privacy. S2D2 is about research. There are also some interesting examples, of course, to look at if you want to say, well, can you give me an example of a project that you could almost take, not exactly as a template, but as a precursor or an example from which we drew inspiration. My example would be the work that the PDF Association has done for the PDF file format. And there's no time today to talk about this, but if you want to read up on that a little bit, then yeah, get in touch or ask a question on the forum. I'm happy to give you some references. And of course, we have partners in this, Lifeboat, who joined with us in the proposal, and Ohio State University, of course, Suren, through S2D2 and otherwise, is a close collaborator here. And then, yeah, you join us. And by join us, I mean, yes, the proposal has very specific deliverables, but there is definitely room for, if you feel in your community with your expertise or something like that, you have a very specific task that you think might be very beneficial to Safe OSE, in the sense that it is typical for different ecosystems or for a particular type of practice of, for example, when software gets packaged, maintaining software bills of materials, maintaining provenance. We can definitely talk about, we as the lead organization in this project can work with you on a subcontract basis, for example, and yes, while we always welcome volunteers, we understand through our own work that expertise and work is not free. So we can definitely try to find ways to work together and compensate you for your contributions, depending on the contribution. Okay, maybe that's enough about background, or too much already. Let's talk about safety, security, and privacy. What does that mean in the context of HDF5 or the HDF5 library and file format? Well, the way I keep it relatively straight, I hope, in my head is, I think good practices in safety, security, or privacy, what do they help me to prevent? And so good safety practices prevent accidents. Good security practices help you thwart or shield against attacks. And good privacy practices avoid exposure of sensitive information. Note that for example, in the case of attacks, there clearly must be an attacker, or there must be an intent. In the case of an accident, we don't call it an accident. If somebody intentionally wants to harm you, well, then that's an attack. That's not an accident. But typically, people don't go out of their way to run into accidents. The cause of accidents are typically engineering that might be poor. It might be misuse of a particular feature, but that's what safety is about. And if you say, well, give me an example in the context of HDF5, for example, a resource leak, poor engineering, an application that crashes and leaves the file in a corrupt state and you lose data, maybe another good example of, or bad example of, poor engineering. Those are safety issues. These are not security issues. Now, could they turn into security issues? Potentially, and there is sort of, call it the trillium of doom, or the Venn diagram. I think my colleague Scott Breitenfeld drew a nice little diagram, which we'll show in the future, where you can sort of try to show the overlap between safety, security, and privacy, and where they all come together. Sort of this innermost overlap is perhaps SSP hell, if you want to call it that. Anyway, security, probably most people are familiar with that. It assumes there is intent and there is an attacker that wants to do something malicious, meaning manipulate data, gain control over a system, or something like that. That's what people most commonly associate with security, and that's perfectly in order. Now, privacy has to do with exposure, meaning, as you all know, in an HDF5 file, you can embed information, sometimes in clear text, meaning attribute names, link names, sometimes in string-based data sets and so forth. Just take an HDF5 file and run the Unix strings command on it, and you'll be surprised. Some people will be surprised what they can sort of determine this way. Now, the result of that is exposure of some of that information. At the high level, or at first order, there is no maliciousness here. It's just exposure, and it's in most instances bad practice due to ignorance or negligence, and then the question is, well, what can you do about it? And there is a lot you can do about it. And developing these guidelines and practices, but also developing the tooling to follow good practices. This is one of the core emphasis of this project. Okay, moving on, but maybe I should take a, are there any, oh, there's chat going on. Is there any question for me? Okay, good, thank you. Any questions so far, or I'll just press on? Okay, approach. So the approach that we are taking in Safe OSE, if you want to assess the safety, security, privacy of the library and file format, but also the wider ecosystem, there are sort of, it's standard practice to split this into two phases: an audit phase, where you really, you have typically multiple models. So modeling is a very important thing here. How you evaluate possible threats, rank them by their likelihood, by their impact. And this is already a good example where S2D2 actually has, from Safe OSE's perspective, done pioneering work, because obviously, A, we are new to this game, but B, there are many experts out there that have been working in this field for a long time. So many of these models are in existence. So, and some of them are specific to safety, specific to security, and specific to privacy. And one of them, for example, a very well-known model is the so-called STRIDE model. I believe it was developed by Microsoft, was to examine threats against software in general. And but then the question is, of course, for a data management library and file format such as HDF5, is a model like STRIDE really a good starting point to try to model security threats? And so S2D2 has done the work, and they concluded, no, it doesn't really cover very well this data management library type of software. And they developed their own model called, I believe they pronounce it CAS, which doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. And CAS actually stands for Core Library Application Storage System and External Libraries. That's why they called it CAS. And I just put something here that I don't need. And so this is already a good example where research coming from S2D2 finds its way into Safe OSE. And in Safe OSE, we will have to go a little bit further. For example, when it comes to models of safety threats, models of privacy threats, we will have to, in a way, also definitely look at what's out there, what people have created, and then sort of make a judgment and say, okay, this is fit for our purpose here, or we will have to customize that or create something more specific for Safe OSE. And then, so once you do the audit, you will understand, okay, and look at sort of prioritization, impact, and so forth. You're not going to be able to do everything. You just pick the highest impact, and at the same time also very likely scenarios. And then the question is, what do you do to mitigate them? And the mitigation, so the audit phase will kind of look in the round and not distinguish between library, file format, and the surrounding ecosystem. However, in the mitigation phase, of course, when it comes to doing some of the engineering work and the community work, is we will be looking inwards, so to speak, and look at the library and file format. But of course, the sort of where the bytes come into the hands of users is sort of this, what I would call outward mitigation, where we have to talk to, and not just during mitigation, of course, these third parties, developers, community members, they will be part of this whole process. Some of them are part already, but from the beginning of the project, the sort of outward mitigation includes applications, and that's third-party applications such as MATLAB and other vendors who have adopted HDF5 in their product, but then also your application potentially. And then, of course, very familiar community packages such as H5Py, and then in turn Keras, and I won't have time right now, but this is an interesting issue, CVE. That's the latest CVE issue that you will find that was filed by the Google Keras team, and it's not an issue with the HDF5 library. There is the capability. There is a questionable practice in the Python ecosystem to embed pickled Python code in HDF attributes, for example, or data sets or otherwise. And then if your library or your software package sort of, in double quotes, knows the secret handshake or has explicit support for extracting that pickled code, then you will just start evaluating or executing that code, and that can have unintended consequences potentially. And so it's not an issue specifically to HDF5 library or file format. It's a form of maybe a questionable practice, but definitely something we will need to talk about when we prepare sort of educational and outreach material for the community. And then, of course, other packages, Julia, NetCDF, RHDF5, and the list goes on and on. Outcomes. So what did we promise NSF, and what do they expect from us? Well, let's go top down here. So definitely on the ecosystem side, we will prepare a lot of educational material, tutorials, practices. We will also have 2 workshops, one in sort of the initial phase in year 1, another one in year 2. And we will definitely have SSP clinics on the sidelines of that, but there will also be plenty of materials available online. Then as far as governance goes, of course, this is about safety, security, and privacy across sectors. So not just research or government or industry, it's for all of them. And for them, of course, it's very important what you might call the software supply chain. So how do software components actually come together in a finished product? And there is, for example, this concept of a software bill of materials. And then the questions arise around, okay, where is your PyPy package coming from, or who built it and who vouches for that? Or maybe some of the components you built them, you are in kind of an air gap scenario, and you are allowed by policy to only install packages sourced from your local environment and so forth. All good, but then the question is, okay, if a vulnerability is discovered, who gets notified? How does it get reported? And right now there isn't really a central place and so forth, but these are the kinds of things that we will have to develop and establish over the course of this project. And then, of course, as engineers, we are always excited about innovation at a technical level, and there are plenty of good things here, and here's just a selection. So definitely on the process side, we want to harden release processes and where we can benefit the wider community. So for example, how the H5Py team builds H5 packages, or if you followed the HDF 2.0 train, there is definitely a lot of activity in Java space with Maven based builds, and so Maven repositories, there will be HDF5 packages there and so forth. But yeah, what's the provenance, who is responsible for what, and who gets notified and so forth. We have to figure that out. There will be some interesting tools, because it's one thing to say, okay, talk about all these practices, but I'm an administrator or an archivist or something like that, and somebody gives me an HDF5 file. How can I assess that HDF5 file in terms of its fitness to be archived, or in terms of its potential challenges it might present to a particular system? So there is already, some of you might be familiar with the H5 check tool, which might get an upgrade as part of this. But then there will also be a tool that I would call H5 audit, that looks at, well, what can I see in an HDF5 file that might present potential problems with respect to safety, security, and privacy. And that could be things like chunk data sets where the chunk size is one element. And in 99+% of cases, that's a terrible idea, and kind of a dormant denial of service attack, potentially. So it would flag something like that. It could flag, for example, the scenario that we just described, that there's executable code, and that could be in pickled form, that could be a shared library, so an ELF binary or something like that that's embedded. These are the kinds of things that an audit tool would look at. It also could look at if there are social security numbers or something like that. So if something that is an outright privacy issue, it could detect things like that, and it would be highly configurable and so forth. So those types of tools. Specifications. If you're familiar a little bit with the PDF process, they developed something called PDF-A. Something similar, I think, makes perfect sense for HDF5 to just create a variant of the file format that is really certified almost for long-term archival. You may or may not know that you can, for example, embed JavaScript code in PDF files. Again, now that PDF has been around for 30 years longer than HDF5, they also have second thoughts about that, and I think in the PDF-A standard, for example, JavaScript is not allowed. More interestingly enough, just with HDF 2.0, version 4 of the file format specification came around, and while the success of independent implementations, most recently in Go, but then in C# and Java and Python and so forth, the success of these independent implementations shows that the file format specification, that is sort of a mixture of human language and somewhat formalized presentation, nevertheless, for maintainability and the auto generation of tools and the upkeep of these tools, it would be fantastic. And also for the auditing of Safe OSE purposes, having a machine-readable specification would be a fantastic thing. PDF, for example, has that, and other formats as well. And then as far as the library goes, think about, there's an interesting paper in the notes for this meeting that my colleague Glenn just presented about digitally signing plugins, HDF plugins at supercomputing. yeah, digital signatures, but then of course a little more nuanced, configuring through policies the behavior of the library, and then also, for example, to enable something called sandboxed plugins, where you can, for example, clamp down on the types of operations a plugin can perform. If you say, well, I need plugins, but then I don't want these plugins to potentially delete sort of subdirectories or something like that. So sandboxing. Encryption, no time to go into any detail there today. But then also when we talked about safety, about accidents, for me, a crash that leads to a corrupted HDF5 file is a safety problem. And we will have some solutions for that. And then finally, that's probably maybe where I should have started, is definitely please go take the survey. We will launch this special interest group very soon. It's in the show notes. We have a GitHub repo here, for example, called Safe OSE SIG. And there is already some material here about contributing, governance, security, and so forth. So look around. If this interests you, reach out, or if you're a developer, create a PR, or you know how GitHub works. And use cases, we definitely want to hear from you. You're welcome. If this is sensitive, then by all means, we are happy to enter into an NDA with you if that's needed. And otherwise, if it can be discussed publicly, then the forum would be a great place, or again, the Safe OSE SIG. Then I mentioned that already. I showed the repo. Yeah, so I guess I'm going to stop there. I'm slightly over time already, and happy to answer any questions you might have. Anybody? No? Then maybe that's it. I don't know, Lori, who is up next time?
We may have a special guest next time, but I can't promise it yet.
Mystery Santa Claus? No.
Kinda, right?
Okay, cool. Well, that's great. Yeah, and please spread the word. I think right now, getting responses, and the responses are trickling in, just because it is such a cross-cutting topic, safety, security, and privacy, and depending on who you talk to, in which environment, and so forth, yeah, you get very different responses, and that's what we expect. And we just want to make sure that a year into this project, somebody shows up and says, here's my problem, and we say, yeah, we see your point, and we wish you would have told us 6 months ago, or so I think, yeah, initially having good conversations, talking to the right people. I mean, broadly speaking, we have sort of pretty good idea who to talk to, but nevertheless, we want to hear from you, and if you have the time and the interest and so forth, yeah, please engage and get involved. And thank you, and come back next time. All right.
Thank you.
Bye. Mm-hmm.